forget everything you were taught in school. For decades, history textbooks presented us with one clear story about how human civilization began. But a single discovery in the southeast of modern-day Turkey took this story, tore it to pieces, and rewrote it from the very beginning. Welcome to the story of Göbekli Tepe. It is a place so old and so architecturally advanced that, according to our current knowledge, it is simply should not exist. What exactly is it and where is it located? If you were to travel to southeastern Turkey today, to the Şanlıurfa province, you would arrive in a region called Taş Tepeler, or the Stone Hills. Right here, on the limestone plateau overlooking the Hern Plain and the springs of the Balik River, stands a massive artificial mound. Scientifically, it is called a tell. It is 15 meters high, covers a massive area of 8 to 9 hectares, and hides a secret that, according to our current knowledge, simply should not exist. When the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began his main excavation here in 1994, he soon realized he had uncovered something absolutely impossible. To put this into context, this massive stone complex is an incredibly 6,000 years older than Britain's famous Stonehenge. It is even 5,000 years older than the very first Egyptian pyramids. The main monumental face of Göbekli Tepe, which archaeologists refer to as Layer 3, was built during the so-called pre-pottery Neolithic period, specifically in the staggering time frame of 9600 to 8800 BC. You might now be asking, who could have possibly ordered something like this to be built? Who ruled here at the time? And that is the craziest part. There was no king, no mighty pharaoh, and no centralized empire with an army of bureaucrats. We are in deep prehistoric era. People at this time were organized in tribes and lived exclusively as hunters-gatherers, hunting wild boars, gazelles, and aurochs. They had no idea how a wheel worked. They had no written language, and they knew nothing of agriculture. So, what was such a massive complex used for? Originally, archaeologists, led by Klaus Schmidt, thought it was purely ritual center, a kind of prehistoric cathedral on a hill. They assumed that no one lived on the site permanently, and that scattered nomadic tribes merely gathered here regularly from far and wide to jointly build these megaliths and hold giant ritual feasts. However, the latest archaeological research has revealed something even more surprising. Limestone water cisterns and residential buildings were found on the mound itself. Göbekli Tepe was thus not just an abandoned pilgrimage site, but a pulsating year-round inhabited settlement. It was a community of hunters who decided their lives to building a sanctuary. When people hear prehistoric building, most imagine a few randomly stacked stones, but Göbekli Tepe is not just a pile of rocks. It consists of massive circular enclosures and is a showcase of absolutely precise engineering. The entire complex is made up of monumental circular enclosures where massive T-shaped limestone pillars tower into the sky. These central pillars are not small feet, they reach heights of up to an incredibly 5.5 meters, and each weighs between 8 and 22 tons. Imagine the immense effort. People without draft animals, without strong ropes, and without metal tools had to carve these gigantic blocks out of the limestone bedrock, move them, and erect them with perfect precision. But the most shocking revelation came with modern technology. Scientists recently conducted a computer analysis and discovered something that absolutely astounded the scientific community. When they connected the center points of the three main enclosures, designed as B, C, and D, they formed an almost perfect equilateral triangle. What does this mean in practice? It means that these prehistoric hunter-gatherers understood abstract geometry. These enclosures were not built randomly over the centuries. This entire gigantic complex had to be mathematically and architecturally planned in advance as one massive project, long before the first stone was ever laid. When you look at those massive pillars, you might wonder why they are specifically shaped like the letter T. It is not just a structural choice to support a roof. According to archaeologists, these are not just pillars but actually enormous abstract statues of humans. When you get closer and look at the detailed reliefs, you will see it clearly. These pillars have carefully carved arms on the sides, hands with noticeably long fingers resting on the belly, and even pieces of clothing such as white belts and loincloths made of ox skins. But there is one very distributing detail. These figures have absolutely no faces. The complete absence of a face, according to scientists, means that they were not meant to be ordinary humans. It was a gathering of powerful gods, mythical ancestors, or otherworldly beings meeting in silent, eternal council. To make the impression even stronger, all the surrounding small pillars in the enclosure are strategically oriented so that they look at these faceless center deities and pay homage to them. Here we come to the biggest revelation of the entire Göbekli Tepe discovery. Previously, we confidently thought we understood how our civilization began. We believed that humans first discovered agriculture. By beginning to grow crops, they could settle in one place, found the first cities, create free time, and only then, out of supposed boredom and abundance of resources, did they begin to build complex temples and invent organized religion. But Göbekli Tepe mercilessly destroys this old model and proves the exact opposite. First came religion, and then temples, and only then came the city. Building such a gigantic megalithic complex required a massive number of organized workers, and hundreds of hungry mouths working on heavy construction had to be reliably fed somehow. Hunting wild game simply wasn't enough anymore. It was exactly this existential necessity to feed a massive army of temple builders that forced prehistoric people to experiment and eventually domesticated wild wheat. Religion was thus the true engine of progress. However, there is also an alternative, much darker theory that scientists call the last stand. The latest research suggests that the monumental construction at Göbekli Tepe might not have been a celebration of a new world, but rather a desperate defense of the old one. Agriculture had already begun to spread from neighboring regions, and the old culture of nomadic hunters felt existentially threatened. This complex could therefore have been their swan song, gigantic, defiant effort to preserve their ancient myths and gods carved in a stone before the wild world vanished forever in the flood of the first farmers. We often associate prehistoric with classic cave paintings. When you look at the walls in the Lascaux cave, you see animals that people commonly hunted and ate. Wild horses, deer, bison. But at Göbekli Tepe, you won't find cute animals or food. The visual language of this place is deliberately menacing and terrifying. It is literally a gallery of nightmare creatures. The pillars are covered with depictions of fearsome and venomous predators. You will see a massive scorpion, venomous spiders, aggressive snakes attacking felines and wild boars with bared tusks. And then there is Pillar 43, known by experts as the Vulture Stone. It is probably the most terrifying and fascinating piece of art in the entire complex. At the top of the pillar is a giant vulture, is depicted, beneath which lies a small, completely headless human figure with a prominent phallus. Although some French conspiracy theories claim this is astronomical map of devastating comet, strike, which mainstream scientists strictly reject as nonsense, the actual archaeological reality is much more chilling. It is a record of prehistoric death ritual known as excarnation. In the culture of that time, the bodies of the dead were not buried in the ground. They were deliberately exposed to the elements and left to be eaten by vultures, which was meant to ritually free the soul from the dead body. This dark practice is directly linked to the physical evidence that archaeologists have dug out of the ground. Of the human bones found at the site, the vast majority are human skulls, specifically 408 fragments, a total of 691 found bones. This incredibly disproportion points to the existence of mysterious early Neolithic skull cult. These skulls were not just tossed aside, they were intentionally modified. They had deep grooves carved into them, perfectly round 5mm holes drilled in them, and the bones were dyed with bright red ochre. Furthermore, microscopic analysis of the cuts revealed another shocking detail. These deep grooves were made with sharp flint into the bones shortly after the person died, when the bone was still fresh and elastic. Every great story must end somehow, and the end of Göbekli Tepe was for years shrouded in a massive romantic legend. For a long time, the story went that the builders, out of respect after centuries of use, deliberately buried their sacred temple themselves under the thousands of tons of dirt and rubble to protect it from the world. But the truth is much more prosaic and harsh, exactly as it tends to be in history. Modern geological surveys have revealed that no ritual burial of the temple ever took place. The complex was built on a steep nature slope. It constantly battled gravity, being destroyed by massive landslides and heavy washouts during rains. The inhabitants tried desperately to save it, reinforcing walls and recycling stones from collapsed pillars. But you cannot beat nature. Once the building definitely collapsed under the enormous pressure of the surrounding earth and became structurally beyond repair, prehistoric people simply gave up and pragmatically turned its space into a garbage dump. And so Göbekli Tepe quietly disappeared underground. It waited there in complete darkness for thousands of years, while humanity discovered agriculture, built the pyramids, invented writing, lived through world wars, and sent a man to the moon. Only now has this complex re-emerged, remind us all that the story of our civilization is much older, stranger, and more incredible than we could have ever imagined. The shadows of these monumental struggles, carved into stone, continue to resonate even 12 millennia after the blows of a chisel, and the rhythm of ritual songs last echoed through the centuries. Thank you for watching.